A stormy night and the unwanted gifts. The storm raged on, a relentless force that seemed determined to drown the city in its fury. The streets of Portland were deserted, save for the occasional flicker of headlights cutting through sheets of rain. It was the kind of night that made people retreat into the warmth of their homes, locking their doors against the howling wind. But at the far end of the city, nestled between crumbling brick buildings and a rusting chain-link fence, stood Angel's Haven, a small, struggling shelter that had become a beacon of hope for those society had cast aside. Inside, the dim glow of an old desk lamp flickered as Anna Keller, the shelter's director, rubbed her tired eyes. She was exhausted, her bones ached from the long hours, her mind clouded with worry. The shelter was running low on funds again. Rent was due in a week, and donations had been scarce. The heater was on its last legs, sputtering warm air that barely fought off the autumn chill creeping through the cracks in the walls. Anna sighed, closing the last case file on her desk. Tonight, she had read about another child left in the system, another lost soul looking for a home. Sometimes, it felt like no matter how much she gave, it was never enough. She reached for her mug of coffee, now cold and bitter, when a sound reached her ears. Faint. Almost drowned out by the storm. A muffled cry. Anna froze, listening. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. The wind had been moaning through the alleyways all night, rattling the shelter's windows. But then, there it was again. A weak, barely audible whimper. Her heartbeat quickened. Anna stood, wrapping her cardigan around her as she walked toward the front door. The shelter was quiet, the children were all asleep in the dormitory, and the few staff members on duty were likely in the kitchen or resting. The sound came again. This time, she was sure. It wasn't the wind. It was something else. Someone else. She reached for the door, hesitating. Something in her gut twisted, an unshakable sense of dread creeping along her spine. Carefully, she turned the knob and pulled the door open. The storm slammed into her. Wind whipped her hair back as rain splattered against her face, soaking into her cardigan. And then she saw them. Two large, canvas bags sat motionless on the shelter's doorstep. Anna's breath hitched. They were soaked, the fabric dark with rain. No markings. No labels. Just sitting there in the shadows of the porch light. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Donations were usually left during the day, and people always rang the bell before dropping anything off. This was different. The whimper came again. Anna's heart stopped. She crouched, reaching out with trembling fingers. The rain had made the knots slick, but she yanked at them, desperate to pull the fabric apart. Her breath came in short gasps as she tore at the opening of the first bag. And then, a tiny hand emerged from the darkness. Anna gasped, stumbling back. The world seemed to tilt as her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. A baby. A real, living baby, wrapped in a damp blanket, barely bigger than a loaf of bread. His cheeks were flushed from the cold, his little mouth opening and closing as if trying to cry but too weak to do so. Anna clutched her chest, her breath shuddering. Oh my God! She turned to the second bag. Her fingers tore at the fabric, the urgency in her movements making her hands shake. Inside, nestled among another soaked blanket, was a second child. A girl, smaller than the boy, her dark hair sticking to her forehead. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even moving. Anna's throat tightened. She reached in, scooping the infant into her arms. The little body was ice cold. Too cold. No, 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 Anna whispered, pressing a hand to the baby's tiny chest. A heartbeat. Faint, but there. Anna stumbled to her feet, the wind screaming around her as she bolted inside. Lisa. Jake, she shouted, her voice echoing through the shelter. Footsteps pounded against the floorboards. Lisa, a middle-aged nurse who had volunteered at the shelter for years, emerged from the hallway, her eyes widening at the sight of the babies in Anna's arms. "Oh my God," she gasped, reaching for the little girl. "Where did they come from?" Anna could barely find her voice. "Someone left them. In bags. Outside." Lisa's face paled as she cradled the infant. "She's freezing. We need to get her warm, now." Jake, one of the younger volunteers, skidded into the room, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. "What's going on?" Anna turned to him, her voice sharp. "Go get blankets. And hot water bottles." He nodded, sprinting toward the storage room. Anna gently laid the baby boy on the worn-out couch, pulling the blanket tighter around him. His tiny fingers curled weakly as he made a small noise, his eyes fluttering open. She turned to Lisa, who was now rubbing the baby girl's hands, trying to get warmth into her little body. The girl's lips had a bluish tint, her breathing shallow. Lisa's hands worked frantically. "Come on, sweetheart. Stay with us." Jake returned, arms full of blankets and hot water bottles. Lisa took one, pressing it carefully against the baby girl's chest. Anna ran a hand through her rain-soaked hair, her mind spinning. Who would do this? She looked back at the canvas bags. Something about them felt deliberate, as if whoever had left them there wanted the babies to be found. But if that were true, why not ring the bell? Why abandon them in the dead of night, in the middle of a storm? Something wasn't right. Anna took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. The babies were safe for now, but they needed medical attention. And more than that, they needed answers. She turned to Jake. "Call the police. Tell them we found 2 abandoned infants." Jake hesitated. "Do you think their parents are looking for them?" Anna's stomach twisted. "I don't know. But we need to find out." She glanced back at the little boy, now wrapped securely in a warm blanket. His tiny chest rose and fell with steady, even breaths. But the girl, she still hadn't made a sound. Anna knelt beside Lisa, reaching out to stroke the baby's cold cheek. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured. "Come back to us." And then, a sound. A soft, fragile whimper. Anna's eyes filled with relief as the baby girl stirred, her tiny fingers twitching. Lisa exhaled shakily. "She's fighting." Anna looked at the 2 helpless infants, abandoned in the dead of night, and felt something stir deep in her chest. They had been left in the storm, in the dark. But she wouldn't let them be forgotten. She would fight for them. No matter what secrets lay ahead, the mystery deepens. The shelter was alive with hushed urgency. Lisa worked tirelessly, pressing warm bottles against the baby girl's tiny chest, rubbing her hands, and whispering soft reassurances. The little boy had stabilized quickly, curling up in the warmth of his new blankets, his breathing strong. But the girl was still struggling. Each shallow breath felt like a fragile thread keeping her tethered to life. Anna paced the small room, arms crossed, her damp cardigan clinging to her. The shock of the situation had worn off, replaced by a relentless storm of questions. Who had left these babies here? And why like this? Jake returned from the front office, his face pale. "I called the police. They're sending someone over." Anna nodded, barely hearing him. Her mind was racing. Something about this didn't add up. Yes, the shelter had seen desperate situations before, mothers on the run, abandoned children, families forced apart by poverty or violence. But this felt different. Someone had left 2 helpless infants in bags during a raging storm. Not at a hospital. Not at a fire station. Not even at the police department. They had chosen Angel's Haven. Anna's stomach twisted. "Jake," she said, voice quiet but firm, "did we check the bags?" Jake blinked. You mean, for a note? Anna turned toward the drenched canvas sacks near the door. The babies had been the first priority. No one had even thought to look for anything else. She strode forward and crouched, her fingers trembling slightly as she searched the first bag. The fabric was stiff from the rain, the inside damp where the baby boy had been lying. She checked the folds of the blanket, nothing. No tag. No name. Moving to the second bag, she carefully unwrapped the blanket that had cocooned the girl. The fabric smelled faintly of something floral, lavender, but it was old, well-worn. Anna's fingers brushed against something hard at the bottom of the bag. A small envelope. Her pulse quickened as she pulled it out. The paper was damp, the edges curling from the rain. Lisa, now hovering over her shoulder, whispered, "Is that?" Anna nodded and carefully unfolded the paper. The handwriting was rushed, messy, uneven, as if written in a hurry. "Please keep them safe. I had no choice. They cannot go back. Do not try to find me. Trust no one. No name. No explanation. Only fear." A heavy silence fell over the room. Lisa spoke first. "What does that mean?" "They cannot go back." Jake swallowed. "Whoever left them here, they were running from something." Anna's grip tightened on the note. It wasn't just desperation. Whoever wrote this wasn't just leaving their babies behind. They were hiding them. And that meant someone, somewhere, was looking for them. The sound of sirens in the distance snapped Anna from her thoughts. "The police are here," Jake said quietly. Anna took a deep breath. Whoever had left these children, they might never come back. But that didn't mean the past wouldn't come looking for them. Shadows of the past. The wail of sirens sliced through the stormy night, growing louder as the police neared Angel's Haven. Anna stood frozen, gripping the crumpled note in her hands, her mind a tangled web of fear and uncertainty. The babies, tiny, helpless, and innocent, were caught in something far bigger than an ordinary case of abandonment. Someone had left them here not just out of desperation, but out of terror. Lisa rocked the baby girl gently, whispering soothing words, while Jake kept a watchful eye on the little boy. The shelter's warmth had done them good, but there was still an unease in the air, as if something unseen loomed just outside the door. A sharp knock startled them. Jake moved first, unlocking and opening the door to reveal two officers standing in the dim porch light. One was a middle-aged man with a serious expression, his badge reflecting the dull glow of the street lamp. The other, a younger woman, her eyes scanning the shelter with sharp alertness. "Detective Mason, Portland PD," the man introduced himself, then nodded toward his partner. "This is Detective Rivera. We got the call about two abandoned infants." Anna stepped forward. "Yes. We found them outside the shelter not even an hour ago." Mason's eyes narrowed. "You said found? Not dropped off?" Anna nodded. "They were in bags, left in the rain. The boy was wrapped up okay, but the girl was freezing. If we hadn't found them in time," she swallowed, unable to finish. Rivera took a deep breath. "May we see them?" Lisa hesitated for a moment, but then gently carried the baby girl over, while Jake lifted the boy. The detectives studied them, their faces unreadable. "No injuries," Rivera noted softly. "They were left here, not abandoned to die." Mason turned to Anna. "And you're sure you don't know who left them?" Anna hesitated, then handed over the damp, crumpled note. This was in the second bag. Mason read it, his jaw tightening. He passed it to Rivera, who frowned. "They cannot go back." "Go back where?" "That's what we want to know," Jake muttered. Mason turned to him. "And you are?" "Jake Evans. I help run the shelter." Mason nodded and then focused back on Anna. Has anything unusual happened recently? Any visitors acting suspicious? Strange phone calls? Anna shook her head. No. We're used to desperate parents, but this feels different. Whoever left them didn't want to be found. Rivera crouched beside the bags, carefully examining them. After a moment, she reached inside the second bag and pulled out something Anna hadn't noticed before. A small gold locket, its chain tangled in the fabric. Rivera opened it and sucked in a breath. Inside was a photo of two people, a young woman with dark eyes and long auburn hair, holding a newborn. Beside her stood a man, his features sharp, his expression tense. Do you recognize them? Rivera asked. Anna shook her head, but something about the woman's eyes made her feel uneasy, like she had seen them before. Mason sighed. We'll need to take the note and the locket as evidence. And we need to get these babies checked at the hospital. Lisa's face twisted with worry. They're safe here. Rivera's expression softened. We know. But until we understand where they came from, we have to follow protocol. Anna's grip tightened on the sleeve of her cardigan. And if no one claims them? Mason hesitated. Then Child Services will take over. Lisa looked horrified. They'll get lost in the system. Not necessarily, Rivera said. But right now, our job is to figure out what they're running from. Anna exhaled slowly, nodding. Okay. But please, keep us updated. Mason gave a small nod, but Anna didn't miss the concern in his eyes. Because whoever had left these babies behind had been running from something dangerous. And if they didn't find out the truth soon, the danger might come looking for them. A trail of secrets. The rain had slowed to a misty drizzle, but the tension inside Angel's Haven remained thick and unshaken. The flashing red and blue lights of the police cruiser cast eerie shadows across the shelter walls as the detectives carried the infants out into the night. Anna stood at the doorway, watching as they secured the babies in the back seat with gentle, practiced hands. Lisa sniffled beside her, arms wrapped around herself as though trying to hold in her emotions. They should be here, she whispered. With us. They'll be safe, Anna murmured, more to convince herself than Lisa. But would they? The cryptic note, the urgency of the drop-off, the terror laced in those few desperate words, none of it sat right. And the locket, that small, seemingly insignificant piece of jewelry held the only clue to who these babies were and what they were running from. As the police car pulled away into the night, Anna exhaled sharply. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, disturbingly wrong. The first clue. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving a gray, overcast sky hanging over Portland like a heavy curtain. Anna barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined the infants alone in some cold hospital room, surrounded by strangers, their fate uncertain. By sunrise, she had made up her mind. She wasn't going to wait for answers. She was going to find them herself. With a fresh cup of coffee in hand, she sat at her desk, staring at a blurry screenshot Detective Rivera had texted her at dawn. The image showed the tiny photo inside the locket, the young woman with auburn hair and the sharp-eyed man standing beside her. The woman's gaze nagged at her, a whisper in the back of her mind. Where have I seen you before? Lisa and Jake arrived at the shelter a few minutes later. Lisa still looked shaken, but Jake had a determined set to his jaw. What's the plan? He asked, as though he had already read her mind. Anna smirked. We're investigating. Lisa gaped. Are you serious? The police are investigating. Yeah, and how often do things get buried in bureaucracy? Jake countered. Anna turned her laptop toward them. We start with the locket. Someone had to buy it somewhere. It's not mass-produced junk, it looks custom. Lisa sighed, rubbing her temple. This is crazy. But she didn't say no. Jake was already pulling out his phone. I have a friend who deals in vintage jewelry. He might recognize it. Anna nodded. And I'm running a reverse image search on the locket photo. If this woman has any social media presence, we might find something. Lisa groaned but grabbed her own laptop. Fine. If we're doing this, I'll start checking missing persons reports. The race for answers had begun. Unraveling the mystery. An hour passed. Jake got a hit on the locket first. Okay, he said, waving them over to his screen. My guy says this locket isn't some cheap knockoff. It's custom-made, probably by a boutique jeweler. Anna frowned. Can he find out which jeweler? Already did. There's a shop called Wild & Company in downtown Portland. They do small, exclusive orders. If this locket was made there, they might have a record of the buyer. Lisa whistled. That's huge. Jake nodded. I'll head there now, see what I can dig up. Anna turned back to her own screen, fingers drumming against the desk. The reverse image search had been slow, but finally, something popped up. A news article, dated from 6 months ago. And staring back at her was the same young woman from the locket photo. Ava Sinclair. Anna's breath hitched as she scanned the headline. Local woman vanishes with newborn baby. Authorities searching for missing mother. Oh my God, Lisa whispered over her shoulder. Anna clicked the article, skimming through the details. Ava Sinclair, a 26-year-old kindergarten teacher, had disappeared without a trace, along with her newborn son. She had been reported missing by her husband, a man named Damien Sinclair. Jake leaned over her other shoulder, eyebrows furrowing. Hold on. The second baby, the girl. If Ava only had a son. Anna's stomach twisted. Where did the second baby come from? And more importantly, if Ava was the one who left them at the shelter, where was she now? Wild & Company. Jake pulled up outside Wild & Company, a tiny shop nestled between two high-end boutiques in downtown Portland. A bell chimed as he stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of polished silver and leather-bound jewelry cases. An older man behind the counter looked up, adjusting his reading glasses. Can I help you? Jake slid his phone across the counter, displaying a clear image of the locket. Do you recognize this? The man studied it, then nodded. Yes. That's one of our designs. We made a few of those about a year ago. Custom order. Jake's heart pounded. Do you remember who ordered it? The jeweler squinted, then turned to a thick binder behind the counter. He flipped through pages, finally stopping on a handwritten entry. Yes, here it is. Ordered by a Damien Sinclair. Jake felt his stomach drop. Ava's husband. A sinister connection. Back at Angel's Haven, Anna had just started reading deeper into Ava's disappearance when her phone rang. Jake's voice was urgent. Anna. Damien Sinclair ordered the locket. Anna's heart froze. Damien, the same man who had reported Ava missing. A chill ran down her spine. Jake, what if Damien isn't just her husband? What if he's the reason she disappeared? Lisa gasped. And if he had something to do with her vanishing, does that mean she's still alive? Anna's grip on the phone tightened. Ava had been hiding those babies from someone. And now, for the first time, they knew who that someone was. But if Damien Sinclair had been looking for his missing wife and child for 6 months, would he come looking for them next? Shadows of the past. The realization that Damien Sinclair had ordered the locket sent a ripple of unease through the shelter. If he had been searching for Ava and the baby, then her sudden disappearance, and the cryptic way the children were abandoned, took on a sinister new meaning. Anna sat at her desk, gripping the armrests of her chair. The weight of the discovery pressed on her, filling the room with an invisible tension. Lisa rubbed her arms as though warding off a chill. We need to tell the police. Anna hesitated. Tell them what? That we suspect her husband is dangerous? We have no evidence of abuse or foul play. All we know is that she disappeared, and he reported her missing. Jake crossed his arms. And yet, she left her babies at the shelter in the middle of the night with a warning. That's enough for me. Anna's jaw clenched. He was right. Something was deeply wrong, and they needed answers, fast. There was only one way to get them. We find Ava Sinclair, Anna said firmly. Lisa's eyes widened. How? The police couldn't find her, and they have resources we don't. Jake cracked his knuckles. Yeah, but they aren't looking in the right places. Anna glanced back at her laptop, determination settling in her chest. Then we start where she was last seen. A trail gone cold. Ava had vanished from a small rental house in Beaverton, a suburban neighborhood just outside Portland. According to the police report, neighbors claimed she had been acting nervous in the days leading up to her disappearance. One woman even mentioned seeing Ava pack several bags into her car late at night. But after that? Nothing. No security footage, no credit card transactions, no phone activity. It was as though Ava had been erased. Jake exhaled sharply, staring at the report on Anna's laptop. She was running from something. Maybe from him. Lisa frowned. But then why did she leave the babies behind? If she was trying to protect them, wouldn't she have taken them with her? Anna's stomach twisted. Unless she couldn't. A terrible possibility loomed over them. What if Ava had been forced to abandon them? What if something happened to her? There was only one person who might know the truth. Damien Sinclair. A dangerous encounter. Damien Sinclair's address was easy to find. He lived in a gated estate on the outskirts of the city, an extravagant mansion, far removed from the modest rental where Ava had lived. Jake parked his truck across the street, gripping the steering wheel. This guy is loaded. Anna peered through the iron gates. The house was too perfect, too polished, like something out of a magazine. It felt sterile, cold. Lisa shivered. Are we really doing this? Jake nodded. We need to get a read on this guy. See if he's hiding something. Anna took a deep breath and pressed the intercom. A few moments later, a smooth male voice crackled through. Yes? Anna cleared her throat. Mr. Sinclair? My name is Anna Keller. I run a children's shelter in Portland. I need to speak with you about. The click of the intercom shutting off made her pause. Lisa's mouth fell open. Did he just hang up on you? Anna's pulse quickened. She reached out and rang the intercom again. Silence. Jake clenched his jaw. That's suspicious as hell. Before they could decide their next move, the iron gates suddenly swung open. A tall man in an expensive suit strode toward them, his movements measured and controlled. His black hair was slicked back, his features sharp, intimidatingly sharp. But it was his eyes that sent a shiver down Anna's spine. There was something cold in them. Something calculating. Damien Sinclair stopped a few feet away, his gaze flicking between them. You shouldn't be here. Jake squared his shoulders. We're here about Ava. A flicker of something, anger? Amusement, crossed Damien's face. Ava's gone, he said smoothly. And frankly, it's none of your business. Anna stepped forward, meeting his stare. Then tell us why her children were abandoned at my shelter. Damien's jaw tightened. For the first time, his polished demeanor cracked. His fingers curled into fists at his sides. What did you say? Lisa swallowed hard. 2 nights ago, someone left a baby boy and girl at Angel's Haven. They were wrapped in old blankets. One of them was wearing a locket with her picture in it. Damien's expression darkened. Then, without warning, he turned on his heel and strode toward the house. Jake cursed. "Hey! We're not done talking." Damien reached his front door and yanked it open. "You have no idea what you're getting involved in," he said flatly. "Go home. Now." And with that, he disappeared inside, slamming the door behind him. The iron gates creaked shut, locking them out. Lisa let out a shaky breath. "Okay. That was terrifying." Anna's hands trembled. Damien knew something. And now, he knew they knew. The hidden room. Back at the shelter, Anna paced the length of the office, mind racing. "He reacted when we mentioned the kids. He knows something." Lisa was still pale. "And did you see his face? That wasn't the reaction of a grieving husband. That was the reaction of a man with something to hide." Jake sat at the desk, typing furiously. "Then let's find out what." A few minutes later, he whistled. "Guys. I think I found something." They crowded around the screen. It was an old real estate listing for Damien's estate. Floor plans, details about the property, including a basement. But when Jake cross-checked it with a more recent listing, the basement was gone. Anna's breath hitched. He had it removed from the records? Lisa covered her mouth. "Oh my God. What if?" Jake nodded grimly. What if Ava was never missing at all? The realization settled over them like a weight. If the basement had been wiped from public records, there was a reason. A very dark reason. And if Ava was still alive? Was she trapped beneath that house? Anna exhaled. "We have to go back." Jake's expression hardened. "And this time, we're not leaving without answers." The House of Secrets. The weight of their discovery settled over them like a thick fog. Damien Sinclair was hiding something. And now, they were going to uncover the truth. Anna, Jake, and Lisa sat in the dimly lit office of Angel's Haven, the glow of the laptop screen casting eerie shadows across their faces. The blueprints of Damien's estate were displayed in front of them, revealing the basement that no longer existed on official records. Jake traced a finger along the floor plan. If the basement was removed from public records, it means one thing: he doesn't want anyone to know it exists. Lisa's voice was barely above a whisper. "What if Ava's still down there?" Anna's stomach churned. If Ava wasn't missing but instead being held captive, time was running out. They had to act. And they had to act now. Breaking in. It was well past midnight when they arrived at the edge of Damien's property. A thick fog clung to the air, wrapping around the massive estate like ghostly fingers. Jake parked a few streets away, cutting the engine. "We do this fast and quiet. No unnecessary risks." Anna swallowed hard, gripping the flashlight in her pocket. "If we find Ava, we get her out and call the police." No hesitation. Lisa nodded, though her hands were shaking. "And if he catches us?" Jake's jaw tightened. "We don't let him." They moved in the shadows, keeping low as they crept toward the side of the estate. Jake had discovered an old service entrance, a rusted metal door hidden by overgrown bushes. "Here," he whispered, reaching for his tools. The lock was old, easier than expected to pick. Within moments, the door clicked open. They slipped inside. And immediately, the air changed. The temperature dropped, and a faint, metallic scent lingered in the air: blood. Anna's heart pounded as she whispered, "Something's wrong." They moved through the darkened corridors, past expensive furniture and immaculate paintings. The house was too perfect, too pristine, except for the faint, muffled sound of sobbing coming from somewhere below. Lisa grabbed Anna's wrist. "Did you hear that?" Jake nodded, eyes scanning the floor. There has to be an entrance to the basement. And then, they found it. Behind a heavy mahogany bookcase, a thin seam lined the wall. It was subtle, almost invisible, but not enough to fool them. Jake pressed his hands against the surface, feeling for a mechanism. Then, with a faint click, the bookcase slid back, revealing a staircase leading into darkness. Anna exhaled. Here we go. The basement of horrors. They descended the creaking stairs, their breaths shallow in the suffocating darkness. The air was thick, damp, rotting, tinged with something sinister. Then, they reached the bottom. Lisa stifled a gasp. The basement was a makeshift prison. Chains hung from the walls. A stained mattress lay in the corner. And in the center of the room, sitting on the cold concrete floor, was Ava Sinclair. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, her once beautiful face marred by bruises. Her lips were cracked, her eyes hollow. But she was alive. Anna rushed forward. Ava. At the sound of her name, the woman flinched, her body curling inward. It took her a second to register who they were. And then, the tears came. Anna? Ava's voice was barely a whisper. You found me? Anna knelt beside her, gripping her hands. We found the babies, Ava. They're safe. Ava's breath hitched. Oh my God. I thought, she broke down, sobbing into Anna's shoulder. Lisa knelt beside them. We need to get you out of here. Can you stand? Ava nodded weakly, but before she could rise. A low, dangerous voice echoed from behind them. You should have stayed out of this. Anna's blood ran cold. Damien Sinclair stood at the top of the staircase, a gun in his hand. A deadly standoff. Jake moved instantly, stepping in front of the women, his body shielding them. Put the gun down, Sinclair. Damien descended the stairs slowly, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete. His expression was eerily calm. Too calm. You had to keep digging, didn't you? His voice was almost disappointed. You don't understand what you've walked into. Anna clenched her fists. We understand that you locked your wife in a basement. That you left your children to die. Damien sighed, as if bored. Ava knew the rules. She tried to leave me. That wasn't an option. Ava trembled beside them. You're a monster. Damien's grip tightened on the gun. And you're an ungrateful whore. Jake lunged. A gunshot rang out, shattering the silence. Anna screamed. For a split second, she thought Jake had been hit, but then, Damien staggered backward, his face frozen in shock. Ava stood, her hand clenched around a knife, blood dripping from the blade. Damien gasped, clutching his side, his expression contorting in rage and agony. His knees buckled. Jake didn't hesitate. He grabbed the gun from Damien's hand and aimed it at his chest. Don't move. Damien collapsed, gasping for breath. Anna scrambled for her phone. Calling the police. The aftermath. The sirens wailed into the night. Damien Sinclair was arrested, bloodied and humiliated, his perfect image shattered. The police uncovered everything, the hidden basement, the reports of Ava's abuse, the trail of destruction he had left behind. And the babies? They were officially identified as Ava's twins, and with Damien behind bars, Ava was reunited with her children. The moment she held them in her arms, she wept, pressing kisses to their tiny foreheads. You saved them, she whispered to Anna. You saved me. Lisa smiled through her tears. You saved yourself. Jake crossed his arms. And that bastard? He's never seeing daylight again. Ava looked at her babies, free at last. For the first time in years, she felt safe. And as the sun began to rise over the shelter, she knew one thing. The nightmare was finally over.